Today we're going to do a teardown here of Pixel Preacher, and we're going to do a little different than we've done some of the past teardowns. On this one, we're going to be looking at the architecture of the site, which a lot of times we do. We're looking about like UX and how you would navigate through the site and where are the conversion points and does the flow really work? Are they doing some good things from an SEO perspective? And I wanted to be a little tighter on this one in focusing in on SEO and how SEO would influence the architecture of a site, because this site in particular has a lot of keywords that are valuable to the bottom of the funnel that are like conversion ready search intent terms, and that would heavily influence how we'd architecture the site. So it's almost a blend between a SaaS site and an e-com site in terms of you have a lot more quote unquote products that have high value conversion search intent than you would on a traditional SaaS site, which might occupy 4 or 5 different maybe software categories like CRM software, sales software, invoicing software, right? Like it might fit 4 or 5 categories, whereas this one's going to fit a lot more of those bottom funnel terms. So with that in mind, I think it's important to start with what does this site do? What are they selling, and how do keywords really tie into this? And then how would they architecture their site to best capture search volume and traffic for those keywords? So let's start with what they do. So Pixel Preacher is a site that is heavily targeted, very niche at the church market. And so this could be, it seems like any denomination of Christianity. So that's where they're focused. And I'm going to scroll down so I just don't have this video in the background. And what they do is they provide the things that a sophisticated audio video team would need, or all the way down to a relatively unsophisticated, someone who just knows something like iMovie or something like that. And typically they're providing the graphics, both still and video, that would be used as part of kind of an outward facing media arm of a church. So for example, before a sermon is started, there's kind of like a countdown to the sermon. It'll start in 10 minutes, 5, and it's just counting down, right? Like they're providing those graphics, but they're also providing graphics that can be used throughout the sermon and then maybe throughout music being played to just have something up on the screen. So it used to just be kind of mega churches that would do this, but now the market's become way larger as the ability to get projectors cheaper. Just technology in general has dropped in cost to allow a lot of churches to do this. And so the person one of the owners of this company, his name's Alex, and he worked on the video side, so he understands the market well. And you can see that by some of the videos and things that they have. And so this should heavily influence. It's probably the most important thing in terms of keyword research is, yeah, you can go on Ahrefs and you can get volume and all that, but really understanding your audience and how they're going to search, because there might be volume for terms from like not your target prospect, and you might go after that term and develop content and spend a lot of money there, only to realize you're attracting the wrong audience. So you get a huge leg up and a huge jump start if you understand the audience, you understand what types of terms they're going to search and not search. And so what I want to start with is walking through kind of how it's set up today. So you've got these sermon series. So you've got kind of like right here, shopping is like the different types of media. So this one breaks it down into like categorical. So you have a series for something about the Romans, about worship, something around Easter, which makes sense, talking about idols. Looks like this is about a couple books of the Bible and specifically about King David, Christmas, etc. So this is categorical, and then these appear to be broken up by types of media. So loops and countdowns, something would go on like a title graphic, whether that's still or video, and then sermon recap, so something like at the end of a sermon. Then they have some freebies. Again, this is kind of like the exact same thing in terms of what was in the shop. And then they got a bunch of other stuff over here. So really want to focus in this kind of shop area and how I would break these down a little bit differently. So when we think categorically, thinking about how someone would search, and if they're likely getting pushed by their boss, which might be a senior pastor or something like that, to say like, hey, here's all the different sermon series we're going to do over the next 3, 6, 12 months. Like I know in the in Methodism, they lay out their entire calendar for the year. I think it's the same for Catholicism. And so like there's different religions, and again, understanding your audience and digging deeper and deeper and saying, well, you know, there's X amount of Methodist church, there's X amount of Baptist churches, there's X amount of non-denominational, like what market are we going to go after? Because I'd imagine producing these assets isn't like a 5-minute ordeal, right? These are templates that can be used in, it looks like if you kind of click into them, that it's a whole file that they're setting up that allows you to, looks like, you know, if you click into this, you're going to see what it actually looks like, but also that they're Photoshop files, After Effects, the bumper videos, all that stuff, right? So certainly not the easiest things to produce, and so have to be really targeted in terms of what we're going to go after. That said, a lot of bottom funnel terms, so it's going to take a lot of assets to go after this, and the more that's created, the more revenue opportunity, the more people that can be hired that can develop out more of these. So this kind of becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. No pun intended. All right, so what I've done here is I did a search for all the stories of the Bible. And all I did is I just did a Google search. This is quick and dirty. I'd certainly go much more in depth if I was doing this type of research. And then I just took a bunch of different modifiers. So you have like graphics, so creation graphic, PowerPoint graphic, creation video, creation title graphic, etc. You go on and on, right? And so I just laid that out, and then I did a search in Ahrefs, and what I've come back to is you can see there's a bunch of books of the Bible with graphic that pop up that have search volume, and 0 to 10 is absolutely fine. One thing, if you're using Ahrefs, if you're using SEMrush, like these numbers are not, they're directionally correct. So there's not a ton of searches for Transfiguration, I would say. Whether it's 0 to 10, I don't know. It's probably, anywhere from 0 to 50, I would say. More likely towards like the 20 to 50 range. There's no way Ahrefs can be perfectly accurate because they don't have Google's data. That said, you can see there's a lot related to books, and then there's stories from those books. And so the way I would set up this site is I would be trying to rank. You got to think of it categorically. It's what pages do we want to rank? And then if I were on that page as a user, what would I expect to see on that page? And then how does that influence additional pages that I need? So the categorical would be likely in a couple ways. One would be books of the Bible, where you would have, I can probably pull this up. Okay, so Genesis, right? So I would have a Genesis sermon graphics page, which would have a window showing, like I would have a specific graphic for creation and the fall, and then one for Noah and the flood, and then one for Tower of Babel, right? I would have all these on there, and then they'd have their own pages. So now you're trying to rank for Genesis sermon graphic, and then creation and the fall sermon graphic on like a sub page, right? And the way I'd set it up is it would be pixelpreacher.com/sermon graphic /Genesis, and then once you drill down and you click on the creation of the fall, it'd be /creation of the fall. Or you could scrape off Genesis there and then just put creation of the fall. It really depends on kind of how you want to break these up. Because creation of the fall could also fall under another category. So sometimes it's good to pull out if it's going to exist under both Genesis and I'm going to make something up and say like Easter. Let's say creation of the fall was like an Easter. It's not, but let's say it was. I wouldn't want it to be housed under Genesis when I'm also going to put it under Easter as well. So I would just have it under its own subfolder. So that said, that's how I would structure this site. Is I would not do it the way they're doing with like series worship, because I think you're going way too broad there, and unless you're going to go into like youth and things like that, and even then I don't think it makes sense. Like, you might use sermon graphics, but I think it looks like you're way more likely to find it broken down by books of the Bible, and then you're also going to have it broken down by times of year or events. So that would be like Easter sermon graphics, Christmas sermon graphics. You would have, I'm going to kind of get out over my skis a little bit here, but you'd have all these other major times of the year that are delineated by the church, like the 40 days leading up to Easter. Like that would be its own category, and you would have graphics that are housed under that page. Now the thing to remember is you can have like resurrection, right? Could be under Matthew gospel graphics, right? And the resurrection would fall under that. But you could also have it under Easter, right? And so you could have that same video under these different categories, like actually on those pages, what I call like category pages. And so they can be in multiple places. And then I would actually blow these out to talk about like, hey, this, I would put text on these category pages. So like faith. There's no real copy on here, right? And then you just have kind of these categories down here. They've done some of them, like Jesus is maybe too broad of a category. There's a lot of Jesus, as I understand, in the New Testament, so that might be too broad of one. Old Testament, New Testament, I think you could people might search Old Testament, New Testament graphics. Again, that would be something to look at on keyword research side. So some of these categories are good. Some of them are a little too broad, so I would kind of redo how I'm doing that piece and kind of let SEO be my guide there directionally. And then I'd also put a little bit more copy on here on each of these, talking about like these Easter graphics are for blah, 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 blah. I'd have an FAQ at the bottom. I'd just try and get a little more text on this page to just help give search engines a bit more insight into what is actually on here. Like questions around like, can I use these graphics with Photoshop? Can I use them with After Effects? What's the best place to use Easter graphics in a sermon? You talk about like using it as you can use bumpers for the beginning, and you can use loops on the countdowns and etc. Right, and just providing a bit more information on these pages. So if we were to look at the site and how many categories they have today, so I've kind of used some modifiers here to get exactly what I wanted from Pixel Preacher's site. So they've got 10 product categories right now, and that's not nearly going to be enough. You see, it's not really ranking for any keywords here, and so there's certainly an opportunity to blow out these categories, even Old Testament, right? Like there's some more that needs to be done on here to rank for some of these different categories that they're utilizing, and it's certainly a bunch that are not even going after. And if we go into what they're actually ranking for, because I think this is a good guidance on where they're already doing well, and this is great data to understand where else could you do well. So Esther, again, book of the Bible, ranking number 2 for Esther sermon series. That's fantastic, right? Ruth sermon series, ranking number 3 for Ruth's sermon series. Jonah sermon series, 5. So it leads itself to say, like, you could do one for every book of the Bible so long as you have some assets there. And even if you don't, getting these pages up and saying, we're working really hard to produce these graphics, feel free to check out X, Y, and Z. At least get a page out there to start getting some, like, showing that you have some sort of representation. And at least if people come there, you can put something like, if you'd like to be notified when this asset is ready for purchase, like, put in your email. And that's going to show you demand side, right? So this might be existing customers. It might be new prospects that are filling this out to be notified, and you'll be able to see that by the email they put in. You can say, like, wow, like 80% of our base that pays on a, they use recurring revenue. They have like a subscription basis. They may have 80% of the people that are customers saying, I really love, like, Jonah's sermon series. Let's say that's one they didn't have, or Easter sermon series, whatever it may be. And that's a way to get kind of product feedback on what your roadmap should look at in terms of the next thing to develop. And this would be a bit of a product-led SEO play, right? It's like you're building out your product in ways that are meeting the demand of search for both prospects and for customers. I think the other thing in here that we see that I didn't mention before is using the church modifier, or maybe like, I don't know if you go like Catholic, or you could do sermon lower thirds. Like there's other modifiers you could try here, but certainly like the elements that are within video that would be useful that we're seeing from an SEO perspective. So like lower thirds, you might see like church bumper graphic or church bumper video, right? And so both from a books of the Bible and categories of like what is the topical area, and then also like asset types would be another type of modifier I'd consider for the site, which you would put likely, it looks like what's ranking here is lower thirds template as a series. I would probably put it as like church video assets or something like that, and it would be like lower thirds. It would bumper, it would be whatever else they have on the site. So it looks like countdowns, right? Like church countdown video or graphic, church loop graphic or video, church social graphic or video. And then social, if you want to go into there, that's like a completely separate area. But obviously like social templates here could be massive. You're basically niche competing with something like Canva, right? Again, church title graphics. So yes, a very high level, but certainly some modifiers that you could do for an asset type level. All right, that about covers it. I think there's massive, massive opportunity here. It just comes by way of hundreds and hundreds of pages that each get relatively low traffic compared to like going after, 500 visits per month or something like that. But again, this is something where it's going to be really low competition, and that you could dominate this market by just producing tons of these category pages and having the associated assets. And even if you don't have the assets, starting to build out the pages to predict demand and help build out your roadmap. All right, that's it.